It's Bayonetta time, baby. Fly me to the moon. Let me play upon angels' faces with my towering gams and 45 cal stilettos. If you thought Devil May Cry hammed it up, Bayonetta skewers the whole pig, taking self-indulgence to the highest degree. Imagine if I randomly broke out into song and dance for 2 minutes right now with no warning, no context. That's Bayonetta's motif in a nutshell, and frankly, it's delightful. Intermixed with your striptease bullet bonanzas, eldritch angels philosophized at you about the eyes, the creator, the plot. Bayonetta's lackadaisical attitude toward it all is great meta commentary on how indifferent players can be to these over-the-top narratives, especially in action-forward titles celebrated for their gameplay. And yet, I felt myself going from skeptical interest to fully invested over the game's runtime. By the time I reached the smokin' sexy climax, I was fully enraptured under Bayonetta's spell. This narrative reaches its peaks in breathtaking battles against the Umbra Witches and Lumen Sages, to the colossal angels doing the latter's bidding. Bayonetta's boss roster is a triumph, at least featuring none I would award Stone Enzo status. Of course, not all reach pure platinum heights, so without further ado, let's rank the Bayonetta bosses from worst to best. Number 8, Jubilees. Perhaps a divisive choice, the finale fight is Bayonetta's worst. I'll say this, there's an intangible climactic feeling that I can't deny here. I had the greatest difficulty placing Jubilees initially as a result, ultimately tumbling downward until it reached the basement for one reason: style over substance. The monumental scale is impressive. The story beats are firing on all cylinders. Jubilees' model and arena are a feast for the eyes. I just wish this foundation housed compelling mechanics to match. Good luck enjoying the visuals amidst the janky camera. Combo-focused combat takes a backseat to punching brittle wings that can't withstand 2 to 3 inputs. Their lightning effects are neat, but frustratingly obscure tells. The elemental phases highlights Bayonetta's half-baked platforming, with its drawn-out emphasis feeling more like a standard stage than a boss battle. At their conclusion, the fight devolves into basic punches from an unpleasant forced perspective. Dodge and attack the third that lingers. A boring rotation only spiced up by galactic punches with deadly wormholes and transformative cosmos. Get hit by the latter and be left defenseless is Chibi Cereza, a compelling penalty for failure. Meanwhile, falling victim to the wormhole is instant death. Your only response is to sprint in Panther form for an excessive amount of time. These sort of deadly attacks only work in boss battles with extremely clear telegraphs and worthwhile counter opportunities for the danger imposed. Here you get telegraphs muddied by the other punches, and a poor animation that pulls you in really hard when you're at range, then slows when you're up close. This tricked me into jumping to create distance, which spells instant death. I guess it's intended to add tension and force you to respect it, but there's nothing else you can do in the meantime anyway. It's a poorly animated cheap shot for newcomers and a nothing burger for the experienced. It's a non-mechanic that ruins what little pacing this punch fest had. Running up the hair to end is a neat idea, but other fights executed this concept already with better framing and obstacles. The Solar Send-Off finale is stunning at a glance, but has major flaws. The fight that immediately preceded this already did this to better effect, with this iteration overstaying its welcome and having dramatic consequences for mistakes. A slip-up you're likely to make due to the sun not being an obvious target. In hindsight, yes, there are lips on the sun, but I'll excuse anyone for missing them with the similar colors and assuming you were watching a cutscene. Once I gained control, I assumed bashing the boss into planets to maximize damage was the goal. But no! You fail and die if you touch a single planet. Imagine making it here cleanly, with the most ideal pacing. A simple misunderstanding ensues and you get nut punched to a bronze trophy by Pluto of all things. I realize I'm being pretty harsh here. Good! The more I think about Jubilees, the more the poor execution pisses me off. It's an incredible spectacle, but in a game full of them, that's not enough to stand out from the bottom. Number 7, Iustitia. After tentacle teases through many chapters, Little Shop of Eldritch Horrors finally reveals itself. Utilizing a classic 3-act structure, Iustitia fails to build upon them in an interesting way. Basic bashes and thrusts are yawn-inducing. The poison spray at least forces clever movement and offers a savvy attack opportunity. Its limited defenses will have you quickly ascending the face tube, easily the highlight here. Zooming ahead while avoiding blades, buzzsaws, and tentacle swipes is engaging, especially with full control compared to other battles relying on quick-time button mashing on baby bumpers. The short combo to punctuate your ascent is short, but sweet. The sour note that follows is what drags Eustitia downward. The subsequent phases offer little new mechanics other than forcing you off the platform. This is hardly a threat when you can leave off at any time and do a quick time input to reset with no penalty to score. If Eustitia's phases built a crescendo of increasingly complex sequences, especially in the tubular transitions, I'd rank it much higher. Sadly, once you've seen the first phase, you've seen everything it has to offer. Number 6, Sapientia. This Seafaring Showdown's departure from Bayonetta's standard combat was risky. If there's anything the game strikes out on, it's the experimental sections that dabble in racing or rail shooting. Shakeups in a game's formula can be refreshing if well executed, but Bayonetta's rarely are. For a game developed on a shoestring budget, it's no surprise scope creep was a contentious issue at Platinum. Take it from Bayonetta producer and now CEO Atsushi Inaba. At the end of development, nobody was happy. Everyone was frustrated and angry. We pushed really hard and asked too much, then asked even more. At the end, nobody was like, oh yay, we got it finished. Rather, we're never doing that again and are at each other's throats. It was a very negative vibe that I still remember to this day. It's safe to assume creating an entirely new movement method exclusively for Sapientia was a time sink. It shows in the rest of its design. In contrast to Bayonetta's unforgiving difficulty, Sapientia's defenses are uninspired. Basic melee hits from the front are hardly a concern when you're ankle biting, dodging banal lasers and fireballs you've seen dozens of times elsewhere. Those melee attacks are at the forefront in Phase 2 with insanely generous telegraphs, offering easy witch time to brutalize its brittle HP. In an effort to elongate the struggle, there are two clear deviations. First, Sapientia regularly disappears, following up with 2 leap attacks from directly below your position, then a final dive from afar. These are laughably easy to avoid, especially because the order of events is always the same. The second is the climaxes to end each phase, forcing you to use directional inputs alongside mashing to guide him towards your hair spider. The only interesting shakeup are thrashes upward that demand quick deviation from mashing for a quick time input. While I do respect the more advanced take on typical Gigaton fare, it's very on rails with limited danger. The final phase leads into a whirlpool racing toward him. Missile fire and spinning lasers are more demanding than anything thus far, but their consistent pattern once again makes your response less taxing. Now, this isn't to say difficulty is all that matters. Delivering a compelling and entertaining encounter is a boss battle's goal. With boss euphoria from challenging battles only one way to reach it. What Sapientia needed to excel was more care put into the new mechanics the fight demanded, and there simply wasn't enough development time to fully flesh it out. Rather than risk sloppy design like Dark Souls Beta Chaos, a platforming puzzle that felt woefully out of place in the game and is universally panned, they played it safe mechanically, leaving the battle itself a backseat to a breathtaking set piece. I would much rather play by-the-books eye candy with clean, if simple design, than a mechanical menace ill-suited for the game's limitations. For that, I commend this lesser of two evils. The biggest disservice as it stands is placing Sapientia so late in the game. If faced earlier, the simplicity could have been more easily excused, especially with the avant-garde mechanical shift. As it stands, while I celebrate Platinum for providing necessary limitations with their resources to avoid a C-Beta Chaos situation, and acknowledge the excellent set pieces, it falls short of delivering as compelling of an experience as the bosses to come. At least I was able to easily notch a Platinum trophy. If you'd like to boost your performance to pure Platinum, I've partnered with Apex Gaming PCs to bring you 3 customizable models. I was a console diehard for ages. That is until I built my first PC and was blown away by the capabilities. I can't live without one anymore. The stress of the build, I could certainly do without. It feels like a game of 4-figure operation ill-suited for my butterfingers. Not only do pre-builds nullify build anxiety, Apex Gaming PCs offers flexible financing options and 24/7 customer support for any troubleshooting and warranty needs. My Tarnished, Demigod, and Legendary tiers have been optimized to maximize your budget using only reliable top brands. Don't like a particular part? Easily swap it out with transparent pricing. Speaking of, they're giving up to $250 off if you use my code Democracy. I'm stoked for a sponsorship offering such a massive discount on a vital gaming platform, so please check out Apex Gaming PCs if you're in the market. Number 5, Fortitudo. The restraint shown in Sapientia and Iustitia make them ideal for the early game. Instead, Fortitudo gets first billing with deceptively complex mechanics for first-timers. Forty's influence reaches you in small encounters throughout the opening chapters, each offering glimpses into the real battle. And yet they left me equally as puzzled as the main fight. He's the first massive boss you face, and although the game tries to remedy this with supersized weave attacks, Fortitudo often outranges you. My trigger-happy mashing was punished tardily, which is probably the point. You need to wait for his attacks, dodge, and counter. Even this can be tricky though if your lack of range baits you off the platform. Fighting in the lava-soaked wasteland was troublesome, especially when you flip the arena into it without clear indication of safe spots. You can rebuild the arena with an hourglass, resetting your position above, but I never felt comfortable that I was handling the mechanics correctly. Turns out I was overcomplicating things. Baiting, dodging, and countering is really all there is to do here. If you fall, fight below and bait his head slams to get them stuck and then slash away. Otherwise, dodge and wait. On the platform, he tail swipes, shoots fireballs, or does various chomps. Only the chomps offer effective counter opportunities, as he typically floats out of your range for the other attacks. With proper understanding, the fight does develop a solid rhythm. Avoid fireballs and tail swipes, rip witch time from chomps to smack and stun him, hop down to punish, then let him chase as he gophers his head. Do this until he roasts the arena, then reset with the hourglass. Rinse and repeat until he ascends to the Colossum Peak, signaling a phase transition. Dodge 3 fire pillars, square up across from him, then quick time leap to mash his head off. Do the same for the second head, then enter the wet paper bag of a final phase. He serves as a damage sponge, only pushing out tracking spikes, a laser, or charging in. All of these attacks leave him a sitting duck for a long while afterward, making this a premature climax. 40's initial challenge lies more in confusing jank than compelling opposition. That said, once you do get a handle on his Sango, the steps are quite enjoyable to execute. I do appreciate how compelling it felt to return, digging into the depth of his design and creating effective strategies to counter his strengths. This gives Fortitudo a slight edge over the shallower battles in the bottom ranks. Number 4, Father Baldur. After a quartet of bloated behemoths, we reach Bayonetta's humanoid style. This big bad's been pulling the story's strings, so to say Baldur's story significance is high would be an understatement. What's not understated are the feature-length cutscenes bookending the battle. They're long, but are packed with interesting narrative detail. Baldur is quite the charismatic character, amplifying excitement for our clash. The question is, does it deliver? In many ways, absolutely, in spite of a few setbacks. First off, what a ludicrous setting. Plummeting from a skyscraper for the entire duration begs the question, just how tall is that building anyway? Don't think about it too much, it's awesome. Quick time event dodges are equally absurd in scale to add to the drama. Tossing buildings at you, calling satellite laser strikes, then slamming them down upon you. Remarkable set pieces, sure, but it's a shame they're relegated to underwhelming QuickTime events. There are also cutscenes between phases that amplify tension and Baldur's characterization, yet both of these pauses bring actual combat pacing to a screeching halt. The 3 phases in between feature a seemingly gradual rise in complexity. He starts with a mixture of ranged lasers, eruptions, and traps, matched with dashes and sword strikes up close. The second phase ups the ante on these slightly, until he goes berserk in the final phase. Any offensive gambit here feels like sticking your joystick in a ceiling fan. How would that work? Beats me, but you're gonna be unhappy with the result. Baldur's wang waggling is insanely fast with minuscule gaps. Since standard perfect dodges don't award witch time, my only reliable answer was the Moon of Mahakala parries. Waggle your joystick right back at him for a satisfying stoppage, allowing you to enter witch time for a massive punish. Parries are perhaps too effective, but that makes them no less enjoyable to execute. I'm sure there are other reliable strategies emphasizing high skill expression, something to celebrate in score-based hack and slashers. It all ends with an unforgettable catchphrase into an easy to execute but immensely satisfying sequence guiding Bayonetta's lipstick shot into Baldur's skull. For his story significance, grandiose set pieces, charismatic characterization, reasonably paced first 2 phases, interesting suite of moves, and balls to the wall finale, Baldur ranks highly in my book. It's merely that his flaws hold him back from the bombastic heights of quality we're rocketing toward. Number 3, Jeanne. The very first boss with appropriate simplicity serves as a mirror to Bayonetta. She uses basic blows, sometimes deflecting you off of her or flipping to evade. There isn't much to the first encounter, but as the hardest enemy thus far in just chapter 2, she emphasizes how ineffective careless mashing is. Your second bout ups the ante with a cooler setting and spooky wicked weaves. Unlike the other humanoid bosses in the game, dodging these allows for witch time. This adds an element of metering offense, baiting desirable attacks, and capitalizing with timely evasion. This continues wholeheartedly into the third battle. As her intertwinement with Bayonetta's tail escalates, so does the threat she poses. The setting atop a plane is stunning, with surprisingly precise camera work throughout making Jubilees blush. Her overall mechanics are similar, with added wrinkles to test your increasing skill. Most notably, her motorcycle-clad phase is really well executed. Her jousts are rewarding to pull witch time off of, but harshly punish you for poor timing, especially if you get greedy. Mashing clashes introduces quick time elements, and though I've bemoaned them throughout this video, they are utilized pretty well here. Their windup is unpredictable, and the margin for reaching the cutoff of 400 to win the flurry is surprisingly tight. Sadly, her final iteration drops the ball a bit, trading the motorcycle phase for spotty camera work on a missile and insta-kill quicktime events. I strongly dislike gotcha quicktimes like this. It's all the worse at the end of an extremely bloated rail shooter level that is dreadful to repeat. The camera work while fighting on the missile is really rough. Before even getting on the missile, Jeanne starts firing them at you, which is a neat idea, but the animation for summoning them is the same as her Wicked Stomp, obscuring fair dodge opportunities. Finally, her Umbra Witch reveal doesn't add any new mechanics, which is really disappointing. It's just a costume change and nothing more. None of this is enough to sour her whole arc, which I really enjoy, and I do appreciate the final battle's homage to all of your encounters to this point. Still, I can't deny it was a bit of a sour note to end things on, knocking her from higher contention. Number 2, Rodan. The classic JRPG super boss brawls his way into a hack and slash with terrifying results. You need to obtain 10 million lifetime halos and buy a million halo ticket to even get entry, then duke it out forcibly on max difficulty with higher damage, aggression, and witch time disabled. Even Bayonetta's fully upgraded HP can hardly stand half a dozen blows from Rodan. Blows that are lightning fast, deceptively varied, and intermixed with potent ranged offense. His design relies on Father Baldur's foundation, but throws out the pomp and pretense for ball-busting challenge. I'm gonna give props to the maestros of Bayonetta's combat who can face him straight up. Myself, let's all have a laugh as I get demolished in seconds trying to do just that. For transparency's sake, I used a maxed out save file to save time. The downside is the grind on higher difficulties to get the best weapons is key to developing the skill necessary to take on challenges of this caliber. Rodan rightfully mopped the floor with me. It wasn't until I heard of the power behind pillow attacks, charge attacks with a Climax bracelet that I stood a chance. Which, for the record, the Climax bracelet has damage so strong that you can't even record scores while you're using it. That kind of damage could close off my gap in skill, but how was I supposed to get off charge attacks here? Baked into Rodan's design, there are a handful of attacks that offer reprieve. First, the Cage Orb. Like Baldur, he sends out 1 and later 2 blue orbs. These follow you 3 times with a brief pause after each movement, then break. The distance it moves is consistent, allowing you to capitalize to put distance between you and Rodan and charge up. Second, he'll conduct a small rain of meteors followed by a final large one. Dodging away from him creates a window of opportunity. Finally, he ends many moves with a taunt signified by an audio cue. However you manage to do this, spacing isn't all that matters. You have to decide when to unleash the sword with minor charge, half charge, or a full charge. The more powerful, the longer you need to hold the button down. Rodan may look open, but if you break your stance too early, he'll deflect it. Too late and you'll get brutally pummeled. You need to release it right as his attack animation begins, then prepare to dodge immediately. Panther rush away, bait better attacks, dodge bad ones, rinse and repeat. Sounds simple in theory, but the speed at which it all moves in tandem with a razor-thin error margin makes this battle exhilarating. You might assume that with such indirect tactics, it minimizes his strengths and avoids what makes the fight compelling, but it's quite the opposite. His oppressive force necessitates resourcefulness in an engaging way, and the strength of his design allows for a full suite of strategies and skill levels to make the most out of this encounter. Every single samurai sheathed saber clash felt like a pivotal climax. I was sweating, smiling, and erupted when I finally landed the killing blow. Fights like Rodan and Virgil and Devil May Cry are sandboxes for players to show their ingenuity with these brilliant combat systems. He may not have the story significance that elevates other bosses on today's list, but when it comes to pure combat depth, no one comes close to Rodan. But he's not my number one choice for today, that goes to Temperentia. This final big boy sets itself apart with a soul strength. Far greater dimension in its design than anything else Bayonetta has to offer. The first phase centers on smashing its fingers. Temper grabs your platform with either hand, then winds up a punch with the other, breaks the platform with shots sweeping towards you, or sprays bullets, testing your dodge skills. If you ever fail, you can hop back up with quick time leaps, but for the savvy, Bayonetta's floatiness allows you to pile on damage uninterrupted. Once you fully damage a hand, an input dodge lets you careen up the arm for an exposed weak spot. The only defenses are soul arrows and a burst of energy, the latter which is hard enough to read that you can't match wildly. Breaking the first arm leads to a second phase where the head's laser shots and wind spirits become the major threat. With both arms broken, a boss like Fortitudo would now end with a whimper. Iustitia would have had a third arm to rip off and and then it'd be over. Temperentia breaks this mold with a new phase similar to Sapientia's whirlwind spin, except players get the reins with traditional movement. In a mad dash around the body, you have to break 3 more orbs. The perspective here puts Jubilees' camera work to shame. While it is disorienting, it's not to an excessive degree, and there are tethers stretching out from the face to direct you toward orbs intuitively. Breaking them is simple, but enjoyable with an impending sense of urgency. More than anything, I appreciate how this battle makes the most of the boss's size. Rather than fighting a humanoid-style battle with something this big, his grandeur is well underlined by his body becoming the arena. It all ends in close quarters against his head, a simple but satisfying battle of laser barrages, laser spins, and wind summons to discourage mindless offense. That said, mindless offense is not a bad idea. You can rack up insane combos here with fast weapons in the gaze of despair. It's easily feasible to hit a max 9999 combo before the end, awarding you with over 500,000 halos. Want to tango with Rodan? This is a great place to farm it all out. On top of being the game's most varied boss with arguably the most creative and well executed design, he's also a loot pinata. What's not to love? His direct combat capabilities may not reach the pinnacle of Rodan, but as a complete package, Temperentia is Bayonetta's best boss. But of course, that's just my opinion. Sound off below with your thoughts on Bayonetta's bosses, and I'll be back soon with Bayonetta 2 and 3, so stay tuned for that and more. To end out today, I only have one thing left to say.